You know, the warmongering against Iran continues here in the U.S. Associated Press had an exclusive over the weekend where they said diplomats say that Iran is poised for a big nuclear expansion. Which diplomats? It didn't even say. The whole article didn't mention if they were American diplomats, Israeli diplomats, who they were. Who cares? Oh, watch out, here comes Iran. Now, why bother with all this warmongering if you're the right-wing government of Israel? You know, you've done airstrikes before, Israel has, against Iraq and against Syria when you thought that they had plants. So why bother with all this, you know, propaganda, et cetera, if you're a neocon supporter of the Likud government? Well, it's because in this case, Israel has several problems, one of which is that it's hard for them to actually do the strikes. New York Times has a good story on this today, saying that they just simply might not have the capability. General David Deptula, who apparently is a retired Air Force lieutenant general, who actually did the bombing raids for us, and he was the Air Force's top intelligence official in 2001 in Afghanistan and in 1991 Gulf War. He says it's just not going to be that easy. They might not have enough planes. They might not be able to refuel them. It's a 2,000-mile trip, round trip to go to Iran. They have to either go through Turkey, they have to go through Saudi Arabia, or they fly directly over Jordan and Iraq, which poses different problems. Will Jordan let them do it? And even if they do that, they have to refuel the planes in mid-air, which they don't have great capacity to do. They only have 100 planes, which apparently, of course, we've got a lot more than that. The United States does. And so it might not be as easy as they think. Iran's defensive capabilities are not as bad as Iraq and Syria's were, and so it's possible that a couple of the planes get shot down. I mean, it could be a mess, and to be able to take out 4 different sites where Iran has nuclear energy capabilities, not nuclear weapon capabilities, very important distinction, they just might not be able to pull it off. In fact, Lieutenant General Deptula says the only army in the world that could pull that off is the United States Army. Hence, neocons here in this country need to get us into the war because Israel might not be able to do it by themselves. So here's another problem that Israel has. Almost all of the top military and intelligence officials, both in the U.S. and in Israel, think it's a bad idea. They think Iran is a rational actor, not someone who's, as soon as got a nuclear weapon, would go ahead and push the button. They're like, that's crazy talk. In fact, 3 former and current Mossad heads have said it's basically a bad idea. Let me tell you who they are. Current Mossad chief Tamir Pardo said that Iran is a threat, but not an existential one. In other words, they will not attack us immediately. Their intent is not to destroy us. If they have nuclear weapons, it's a problem for us in terms of strategy and negotiations, but it's not like they're going to attack. How about former Mossad chief Ephraim Halevi? He said, it is not in the power of Iran to destroy the state of Israel, he doesn't believe they will attack either. How about Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff Dan Halutz? And it's a former one. He said, Iran poses a serious threat, but not an existential one. They're all saying the same thing. Calm down. This attack has a lot of different problems. If you do it, you're going to start a war we didn't need to start because we don't have an existential threat. Now, Meir Dagan, who was the Mossad chief from 2002 to 2011, he says that if we do it, it would mean regional war. In that case, you would have given Iran the best possible reason to continue their nuclear program, or a nuclear program, because they don't currently have one. So he's saying it would be ironic and counterproductive, because then if we attack them, they say, well, the only way to prevent that attack is if we have nuclear weapons. By the way, another person who shares that idea is General Michael Hayden, one of the most right-wing guys in the Bush administration, saying that, hey, you know what? This would, the attack would, quote, guarantee that which we are trying to prevent, an Iran that will spare nothing to build a nuclear weapon. Okay, all right. How about Martin Dempsey, though? I mean, these guys are former officials. Some of them are current. Some are Israeli, U.S. You get the whole broad spectrum. But how about the head of our Joint Chiefs of Staff? The one guy who would know best. Well, let's go to his testimony.
I think that Israel has the capability to strike Iran and to delay the production or the capability of Iran to achieve a nuclear weapon status, probably for a couple of years. But some of the targets are probably beyond their reach, and of course that's what concerns them. That's this notion of a zone of immunity that they discuss.
And if that were to happen, do you believe that Iran would engage in retaliatory measures, not just against Israel, but against United States interests in Iraq and Afghanistan?
That's the question with which we all wrestle, and the reason that we think that it's not prudent at this point to decide to attack Iran.
Not prudent to attack Iran. He's telling them, don't do it. It's a bad idea. Pressed further, he has this to say.
You think that is still unclear, that they're moving on a path for nuclear technology, but whether or not they choose to make a nuclear weapon is unclear?
It is. I believe it is unclear, and on that basis, I think it would be premature to exclusively decide that the time for a military option was upon us.
Again, clear as day, saying it's not even clear that they're going to have nuclear weapons or they're trying to get nuclear weapons. That's not clear at all. So what the hell are you attacking them for? Now, the third part.
When you observe Iranian behavior, does it strike you as highly irrational? Does it strike you as sort of unpredictable? Or do they seem to follow their national interest in a fairly calculating way?
That is a great question, and I'll tell you that I've been confronting that question since I commanded Central Command in 2008, and we are of the opinion that the Iranian regime is a rational actor, and it's for that reason I think that we think the current path we're on is the most prudent path at this point.
They are rational actors. Why does our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest official in our military, say that? Because what he's saying is, these guys are not going to fly off the handle and attack us with a nuclear weapon out of nowhere. If we start the war, we'll be starting a war we don't need to start. They're not going to start it. In fact, our national intelligence estimate, that is the estimate of the entire intelligence community, said that they are, quote, guided by a cost-benefit approach. Rational actors, they're not going to fly off the handle and use the nuke. This is our intelligence, collectively, okay? How about James Clapper, who's the director of national intelligence? He said in 2011, we continue to judge Iran's nuclear decision-making is guided by a cost-benefit approach. They're not crazy people. They're going to make rational decisions based on a cost-benefit approach. Don't attack Iran. That's what they're all saying, yet when you turn on television, with the exception there of Fareed Zakaria, who covered this well, everybody's talking about, we gotta go there. Ballistic missiles and lab coats, etc. Oh my God, Iran could attack, if counterattacked, or if attacked in the first place, right? And we've covered that for you before. So why? Why are all the intelligence officials in Israel and the US saying, don't go, it's a bad idea? And at the same time, we have this tremendous propaganda in the US to go to war with Iran. Because the right-wing government of Israel and their allies here in the United States have made a decision. Israel can't do it alone. We've got to push the US into war so they could do our dirty work. And we don't care that it's a bad idea. We don't care that our generals think that, US and Israeli. We don't care that intelligence thinks it's a bad idea. They have their neocon philosophy. They think if they obliterate all the Middle Eastern governments that are opposed to them, somehow the Arabs, and in this case the Persians, will bow their heads and go, oh my God, you were so right, our mistake. Well, it's not going to work that way. You got to listen to the people in this case that know the intelligence and know the military options, and they're telling you not to go. But here's the way that they think about it. They think, look, if Israel does the original bombing, what's going to happen? Iran is going to counterattack. Once Iran counterattacks, what's going to happen? The U.S. is going to get sucked into war and finish the job. Because what are they going to do here? If you know anything about American politics, if Israel, it doesn't matter who they started the war with, it doesn't matter who was right or who was wrong. If Israel gets counterattacked, it is not a 99% likelihood. It's a 110% likelihood that the U.S. will join Israel in whatever battle it has. Israel could attack Norway for no reason because they say, we didn't like the Vikings back in the day. We would go to war on Israel's side. So that's the logic. That's why you see all this propaganda. That's why the right-wing government of Netanyahu thinks, who cares what Mossad thinks? Who cares what my generals think? Who cares what the American generals think? All I got to do is press the button. Once I press the button, the U.S. is screwed. We dictate their foreign policy for them. They got to come join us. And that's how we get sucked into war. Let's hope to God it doesn't happen.